Greetings, citizens, and welcome to another edition of Flashpoint, a television program of issues and ideas, where the thought-provoking party has already begun. And we're welcoming you to this session number 362. Flashpoint is brought to you by the Lawrence Debate Union, an endowed co-curricular activity at the University of Vermont, which teaches UVM students the arts and skills of debating. Not like the presidential candidates do it, I mean real debating. Teaches them those arts and skills and then has them debate competitively, educationally, and hopefully with a happy heart against all kinds of people all over the region, the nation, and the world. One of the other things we do to promote discussion, discourse, debate, and a bunch of other things that begin with the letter D is to bring you Flashpoint. Flashpoint is not only available on Channel 15 here in Burlington on the cable system, but is also available on Channel 12 on the UVM cable system and is available for on-demand viewing. Go to our website, debate.uvm.edu, and click on the Flashpoint icon, and there'll be lots of different episodes for you to choose from. Enjoy. My name is Alfred C. Snider. I'm the Edwin W. Lawrence Professor of Forensics at the University of Vermont, and proud of it, and I'll be your facilitator for this burning and light-producing discussion. Joining me today, I have four debaters at the University of Vermont. We don't believe in experts. We think that citizens can well, experts, we believe they exist, but they're not necessary to have a thoughtful discussion. You can research things, you can find out for yourself, you can think critically, and you can have an opinion that means something. And I'm glad to have all four of you here to carry on the Edwin W. Lawrence Debate Union tradition and do just that. On my left, I have outstanding environmental activists. That's why we use recycled paper and UVM copiers. Taylor Lalemand. And what do you think how do you think you'll direct your efforts towards activism once you graduate?
Well, I'm planning on taking the LSATs in June, so hopefully with a legal education, I'll be able to effectively influence and persuade my opinions of environmental excellence elsewhere. Okay, awesome. On my immediate left, I have Stephanie Keller. Stephanie Kimerer. No, that's
Leslie. That was my debate partner.
That's your debate partner. Stephanie, who's our squad captain, and you are from Florida. I just want to ask you this question. Did you ever learn to put up with the winters here?
I mean, I've dealt with them very well. I finally bought a big, thick Burton coat, and so this winter was by far the easiest, but I don't like it still after 4 years. So.
Right. And probably in the future you won't live north of...
pretty south, yeah.
South. Okay, all right, well, but that's fine. We need to be spread out evenly across the globe. On my far right, I have Joseph Torda, who's from Massachusetts, right?
That's right.
Okay, and do you find that a lot of Vermonters have hard feelings towards people from Massachusetts?
Yeah, I have found that. It's sort of discouraging at times. They like our baseball team, but they don't like us.
Right. They like the football team, too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
But, well, it just goes to show that intolerance can be found
anywhere
in a lot of places.
That's right.
So let's make sure that our own lives don't go uninspected. On my immediate right, we have Sam Ricker, who's our senior delegate to the program. And what's an issue that you think we should have a Flashpoint show about at some time in the near future?
I think we should discuss how college tuition is funded. I really think we need to look at options where the government pays for students to go to school, because that's an issue that's really, I think it's a big issue in this country, and I think we need to reform our higher education system. Mm-hmm. So that's something to think about.
Okay, great. Well, we'll grab that. Maybe that's coming up and before we get to 370. And I never thought we'd get to 300. Now I'm concerned we actually will reach 400. And I know that we have three fourth-year students here, and try to come back for show number 400.
Okay.
If you get a chance. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, show number 362, torch goes to China. Well, China has the Olympic Games. Duh. But they have promised in their campaign to host the Olympics that they would have a much better human rights record. And that record has been questioned in a couple of different ways. There's been a number of media crackdowns. There has been a lot of things to do with planning the Olympics, forced relocation of people, weather control, and then, of course, recent problems in Tibet. So a lot of people are unhappy with China's record and a lot of these things. Now, but we've promised to have the Olympic Games there, and now the question is, what do we do? So what we've done here is assemble a number of what we think are important issues, and we're going to try to work our way through them in thinking about this complex phenomena, because I think that you hear bits of things in the news, the torch was interfered with, and monks were protesting, and the government said everything, but you don't really get it laid out as issues. How about this? Aren't things better in terms of human rights in China now than they were 20 years ago? So, I mean, it may not be perfect, but it's better. What about that?
It may be better, but I think that there are still a tremendous amount of issues that need to be dealt with. People are still being sent into re-education camps for doing very little. Forced relocation, as you mentioned. There's a tremendous amount of human rights abuse in China right now. So that saying it's better than it was is sort of masking the gravity of the issue itself.
Well, this is what the Chinese directed media says.
Right.
Things are better now than they were. Anybody, you guys buying that argument?
I think it depends on how you define better. I mean, as far as the Chinese media has portrayed it, there are some benefits economically for their support of Tibet, and I think that there are some benefits, but despite these benefits, culture is still being lost, and to not account for this kind of cultural loss is not a very accurate representation of what's happening over there.
But at the same time, it is better, and it can maybe get better. And maybe by bringing something like the Olympics, bringing all the media and all the what to do with it will help it to improve even more, potentially.
Well, you would have to say that the Olympics in China has increased media scrutiny.
It has increased media scrutiny, but it's also increased human rights violation. So they're working to clean up Beijing temporarily for the games, and in doing that, they're oppressing people at a much higher rate than they were prior to their awarding of the games themselves. So,
okay, this is a Chinese press release from China Daily. Facts, figures about Tibet's development, how things are better there. And one thing they notice is the life expectancy of Tibetan people increased from 35.5 years before the democratic reform of 59. That's to 67 years now. So that's good. But in reading a lot of this others, it just didn't work. The population is way up. Are you surprised by that?
no.
No.
Why not?
Chinese relocation into Tibet.
Yeah. They're shipping in hundreds of thousands of Chinese to outnumber them. 110 extra hectares of grain in 2007. It's like, why would you? I'm sure there's now a train that goes to, and but I think that things may be better. Here's a wild one. These are a group of Chinese scholars saying that the Tibet had, before China, before 1959, Tibet had feudal serfdom where the citizens were slaves, and there was just like Western Europe in the Middle Ages. Okay, and I guess the question I'm asking is, just because they don't have feudal serfdom anymore, I'm not sure that's why they should have forced rapid economic development that's destroying their culture.
It seems to me that
It's getting better arguments all about that.
To me it seems like some of the infrastructural changes, building more hospitals, creating better schools, things that the Chinese government may have done and are now championing, are things that could exist in a free Tibet because the Tibetan people can continue to inhabit these buildings. I mean, they're the ones that are predominantly employed in these hospitals and in these schools, so they can continue teaching, and they would probably do it.
Well, but the Chinese government's argument is going to be that they've poured a ton of money into Tibet to develop it, and paid for all these things that couldn't have happened otherwise.
And I believe that's a very valid point. I'd like to note that the Dalai Lama has never advocated that we break free and become entirely free, Tibet being its own autonomous. They do want autonomy for their country, but they don't want to have entire say over everything that's happened. They recognize that China has donated a lot of time and money and effort into their culture, and it's unfortunate that they don't have the freedom of religion, they don't have the freedom of expression that they've wanted, and so desperately are expressing this want in their recent acts. And this only works to vilify a spiritual leader, and I think a lot of people have big issue with that.
Well, that's down our list, but let's talk about that for a minute. Now, the Dalai Lama has been an interesting combination. He's not democratically elected. He's born and reincarnated into a body,
Right.
and then he becomes the leader. But in the West, he has been put up on a pedestal as being awesome. And then, of course, in the China press, they refer to the Dalai clique, like a terrorist gang of the Dalai Lama. I mean, isn't that strange, though? Somebody who's reincarnated?
I think there is always the danger when you're dealing with a cult of personality. It's like the individual becomes incredibly powerful. And I mean, there's always the potential for abuse there. And while we may not have seen a tremendous amount of it, I think that it's always dangerous to put a figurehead, an individual at the head of a movement.
Okay. So, why the Olympics? Why should the Olympics make a difference?
Well, I think the Olympics do make a difference because it is the one time where you can truly bring attention to the issue. And even though most people would argue, oh, everyone knew about the issues that were going on in Tibet before, but the sad reality, the fact is, a lot of people who aren't informed or who don't bother to go out and, let alone read the news, but let alone, delve deeper into the issues, don't know about this. And so the Olympics is, kind of a catalyst to raise this issue. Whether it's the right vehicle or not, we can debate, but it is a method for which to.
With all the countries uniting too. I mean, that's the big thing, is you have all these different countries and leaders and people interacting together and trying to do so for peace. That's what the Olympics is all about. And so the media coverage of the Olympics in and of itself is astronomical. So it makes sense why people got on the bandwagon.
But there's an Olympic rule that prohibits anybody involved in the games from making a political or religious statement.
I mean, it's on the books, but it hasn't changed things. I'm thinking Jesse Owens in Berlin.
Well, he didn't make any statements. He just ran fast.
I guess it wasn't an overt statement.
Guys in Mexico City.
The Mexico City, of course. Also, I mean, boycotts. Boycotts are not a new thing. People boycott the Olympics every year, it seems like, or every there's a country boycotting almost every games.
And the bottom line is, it's still a competition. So even though it's supposed to promote unity between countries, it's still competing with one another, and one another's global competition can just make a statement politically by not showing up. I know, particularly in some sports, like in snowboarding, some members chose not to participate in that competition because it should be about the sport, not dividing people, but uniting them.
Also, you see the politicization of the games by the country. China uses this as a political tool. They say, "Hey, look, we're getting better. The West recognizes how much better we're getting." They use it as sort of justification and legitimization of the Chinese government. There's a tremendous amount of pro-China propaganda that's been circulated because of the games themselves.
And it could be precisely because China is using the games so strongly in their global PR campaign that human rights, Tibet-oriented protests, and disagreements really hit him where it hurts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe that will do something about it. Who knows? Well, I've heard some people say that there are different standards of human rights, that in Asia, and particularly in countries like China and Central Asian countries, the conception of human rights is more about, giving people the basics to live, that it's more of a collective economic and social well-being of the group, as opposed to the European concept, which tends to be very personal, individual citizen. And so to the extent that China is saying, hey, our citizens are better off, hunger is being vanished, people in Tibet are living longer, yeah, we, may not allow free press, we may edit websites, we may do X, Y, Z, and the other, but what do you think of that argument?
Well, I think cultural relativism can be pretty dangerous because you're saying that it's okay for someone to oppress someone else because they're from a different culture. And, that's a culture that I don't quite understand. I think that there are some rights that are universal, that are human rights.
Right, I think China, though, that's like kind of the point, is they're giving, people have food, shelter, things like that, technically. And it's just ironic that people in the West are making a big deal about rights and lifestyles that they don't necessarily understand, and then are boycotting and thinking that their personal boycott of not turning on NBC or whatever is really going to make a huge difference with that. I don't know. I think there's something to be said about importing our ideas of culture and rights onto other nations. But
at the same time, there's a lot to be said for the media coverage, which has blindly denied some of the actual violence that has taken place. And that kind of censorship is dangerous in itself, not in the way that maybe freedom of information doesn't appeal to mass cultures as a human right, but in our culture, it seems as though being lied to by your government isn't preferable.
right.
And the way I understand international coverage is that it's not going to be overtly censored, but that the parameters of international media are going to be limited to Beijing itself. And Beijing is going to kind of become, ideally, the Chinese government wants to make it kind of a bubble city where it's surrounded by, it's very heavily controlled. It becomes like the model city,
All right, what do you think will happen if I win a gold medal and I'm standing on the platform, they start to play the national anthem of my country, and I pull out of the back of my sweatpants a Tibetan flag and hold it in front of me?
I think
and
that'll
mouth,
be
free Tibet.
I
What
think-
do you think would happen?
I think it'll be pivotal to see how China reacts to that. They have all this what to do about how they're becoming so much better, and I think actions will speak louder than words if something like that happens. And the way they portray themselves during the games is going to really make their role in the coming years in the international realm and how they do react to that. So obviously, if you have a bunch of guards trampling them or your TV being censored out, that's going to really show how not serious they were when they made all these claims. So.
Yeah, I think off camera they're going to do all they can to prevent something like that from happening. But on camera, I don't know. I sort of doubt that they'll have the Chinese guard come and tackle these athletes if they're,
No, they won't do that.
But I don't know.
Okay, let's say you're an American TV network and you're broadcasting the Olympics, and the Chinese say, guess what? Here's Comrade Wen is going to cut the feed from any camera that he thinks is showing something, really, really, really bad, like this. Do you think they would give in, or
No.
is that part of their contract? Or?
I don't think they would give in because China's not a market for national television. It's not like NBC has a channel that broadcasts in China.
Yeah. Okay. How about the torch? How appropriate do you think, to interfere with the movement of the torch?
I think any kind of activism on that level, it should be acknowledged because it's up to people to take control of their government. The government should fear the individuals, not the other way around. And I think any kind of activism on that level speaks loudly and has to be recognized. It forces people to understand that just because our governments might be conceding that it's okay to carry on in one sort of manner, if we allow for this kind of expression to be covered and learned from, then we can have our politicians have a better understanding of where we stand as a people.
And I think it was ironic in San Francisco, too. You had all these people out there protesting for peace and free Tibet, and yet they're doing so at something that is traditionally supposed to be a peaceful activity when you have the torch run through your town. And, they want this, all these good things, and yet they're going about creating violence and creating issues, and the city had to reroute the parade and all this just ridiculousness that I think it got a little out of hand. In a
I think
couple
the
places.
protest is valuable, but attempts to extinguish the torch is against the spirit of the games. I think that nonviolent demonstration is key. And when you have physical violence or you have any kind of malicious activity, then it becomes negative.
So civil disobedience, passive resistance would have been better.
Much better.
Right? Hundreds of people lying down
In front of
it?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that?
Sure.
Okay. All right. How about those guards? The torch guards.
Cloaked in mystery.
Well, I mean, I think the minimum height is 6'3". They're all trained security operatives. They're on a tough mission. There's a bunch of them around it. They have those spooky-looking blue tracksuits on. And, a lot of them were pushing people aside. And I understand they had a little scuffle with London police pushing them aside to make sure that they were in control of the situation. Does that show a paranoia that's kind of scary, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're showing the world that you need to have these huge, violent, secretive guards, protecting this peaceful symbol. It seems like a little contradictory.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was young, people would run the torch. It'd just be like one dude, like a couple Olympic officials around and maintaining it, but he'd be like your local town hero with the torch running through town. And now it's like it's just like a mass of people moving. The whole spirit of it and seeing someone carry it on is totally lost. The symbolism is gone.
Although I understand it's impossible to extinguish the torch.
Well, they have
They have this high-tech thing
Yeah.
where the flame can't be. It's protected from nuclear weapons or whatever. Okay, let's talk about other methods. Now, a boycott has been talked about in a couple of different senses. First is that world leaders should not go to the opening ceremony in protest. What do you think about that?
I think that would be one of the most effective demonstrations, because the opening ceremony is just a lot of smoke and mirrors. It's a grand.
Yeah, it's pomp and circumstance. Yeah.
That's a better phrase.
No, it's smoke and mirrors.
But it doesn't end up hurting the athletes if world leaders choose to protest at the Olympic Games, because we always have these debates on either for or against this, and the argument that always comes up is we don't want to harm the athletes because they're the ones that worked so hard to get to this level. But by not having the leader of your country show up, it is the way of taking a stance without actually harming those who aren't involved. So
That's true.
Okay, so more people are executed in China each year than in the whole rest of the world. Many of them are executed when their organs are needed for purchased transplants, and all you can do is not go to the opening assembly? I hear that argument being made.
I don't think that the Olympics are necessarily the appropriate venue. Why don't you make some real steps? Like the Olympic Games, even if you boycott the entire games, even if your president gets on national television and speaks out against the Olympics, that's definitely not enough. I think that if you want substantive change, you need real action.
And boycotts in general aren't effective unless there is a mass amount of people boycotting.
I mean, unless you get every country to boycott
right,
the Olympics.
Like the example of people Buy Nothing Day in America is an example of a boycott, which really does nothing because there's so many other people buying things. Same way with the Olympics, so 4 countries aren't going to go. It'll get slightly media coverage.
Yep. Jimmy Carter boycotted the Olympics because of the Afghanistan war. Boy, isn't that an amazing thing?
Yeah.
And the games went on, and a lot of people went, and a lot more Russians won gold medals, and they had separate freedom games, but and if it didn't mean anything to the Russian regime then, I'm not sure why it would mean anything to the Chinese regime now. They at least have more levers of power.
Yeah.
Okay, one of the things I've been surprised about is that there's been a surge of support for the Chinese position saying there's been false information spread. Things are better in Tibet and China. We got to give China a chance. Don't disrespect China. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's Oh, sorry, you can go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I just want to say I saw something on the news about some San Francisco people of Chinese descent, and they were very excited and really saddened because you have to think, like, yeah, there's a lot of messed up things going on there, but there is a lot of people also who are very excited to see something like the Olympics come to China. And they were interviewing this woman who said, you know, she was raised in China and then moved, and she was so excited. She's like, I could never even dream of the day when the Olympics would be in my country. And so I think in a way some of this pro-China is good for, you know, some of the people.
Yeah.
Except for this guy here, who's saying
Yeah.
that if there was genocide in Tibet, it'd be better to forget about it now. Publishing in China Daily, and he looks like a European guy of some sort. But yeah, there's been a lot of, and this calling the Dalai Lama the Dalai clique really bothers me, as if it's sort of a gang of
Thugs or something,
of terrorists.
Yeah.
Well, it's time to. We have more things on our list. We didn't get to them. We never do. You know, I think it's so true. No discussion is ever complete. We're always just
True.
scratching the surface of that infinitely huge reality thing. But given that, I wanted to ask you a question, sort of to summarize this. And we picked this one, so this may seem a little jaunty, but that may be how. Yeah, but it's still going to be a hit on TV no matter what.
Yep.
What's your reaction to that statement? Let's start with you, Joe Torda.
That's true. I think that people are still going to watch. You know, everyone's got their favorite events. I know I've got mine, and I'm going to still tune in, you know.
Sam Ricker.
Yes, because turning off your TV doesn't really help the situation at all, because there's going to be so many other people watching it. And I think viewership will be even more increased because people might be looking out for these impressive symbols of protest at ceremonies and whatnot.
Okay. Taylor Lalemand.
I believe we will be all tuning in, supporting our athletes, and I think it will be interesting to see what kind of activism is shown.
Stephanie Kimerer.
I think it will be a huge hit, which is the irony of all this big what to do, and then as soon as it starts, people are going to sit down with their families, friends, watch opening ceremonies, watch their favorite events, and things will just trek on and stay the same the way they are.
Yes, but not for me. I plan on watching as little of it as I possibly can. But not because of human rights, just because I'm really not interested. But I do care about human rights. Thanks a lot for watching this edition of Flashpoint. Please feel free, if you wish, to take our advice, which is
Think for yourself.